Hi everyone, this is Dr Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode where we talk about part 2 of the Thoracic Sling. How are you today, Sophie?
Hi Raquel, I'm going really well. We didn't actually mean to turn this into a part 2 series, but it just turns out there was so much information and so much we could think of that it's had to be. So
yeah, and it is an important area that has had a lot of discussion, so probably deserves a bit of extra attention.
Yeah.
So when we think about a functional thoracic sling, so in part 1, if you haven't listened, we go through the anatomy of the thoracic sling. So all of the muscles and their connections and where they connect, and then their actions as well. So if you were kind of describing a functional thoracic sling, how would you describe it?
So it would involve good function in all of the structures we talked about, and that means I'd be expecting to see scapular glide in all directions. So I'd be expecting it can go cranially, caudally, and also that it can move dorsally, so upwards and ventrally downwards, and also that I could rotate it a little bit, either with my hands or picking the limb up off the ground and being able to push it around. At the same time, I would expect free shoulder movement, and the shoulder goes in basically every vector you can think of. So because it's a ball and socket joint, so it can move in so many directions. So having free shoulder movement, not in a way though that is over exaggerated. I'd want a strong controlled shoulder movement when the horse chooses to move the leg. And when I pick it up, I'd expect that it's not just like swinging the leg around like there's no resistance, but it can move well within, with a little bit of tension, like the body is supporting the shoulder. I would hope to see balanced front end and hind end coordination if there's a functional thoracic sling. So that means that the horse can move it well. It means that it can balance well on it as well, and that it can shift weight from front to back. I would hope to see spinal lift and length throughout the top line. So firstly, I'd really want to see that the base of the neck is able to lift, but also the back and all the way through, because like we talked about in the last episode, all the pectorals that run underneath the sternum and to the inside of the humerus, when they engage, it also allows for the back to lift up there as well. I'd be hoping for really balanced and correct neck and sternum engagement. So that doesn't just mean high head carriage, but it means the ability for the body to lengthen the head and neck. So the rhomboid, which we talked about in the last one, has to lengthen, which means that it's doing so healthily, and that the neck is developed in a way that's nice and symmetrical. There's no areas that are really rock hard or underdeveloped or sunken or hollow. And I would hope to see that the horse is able to bring their hind end through for creating power and propulsion for both forward and that when the horse can create forward and upward motion, like it can absorb what's coming from behind and lift in front, it means that you have a really good relationship between the front and the back end of the horse, I think. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's all the stuff that you said, obviously, but I would also highlight the ability of horses to lift their forelimb. So like just when you pick up the foot, I have some horses where the thoracic sling is quite dysfunctional and I'll pick up their foot and they'll pull the leg away. So that can be one sign. Or the other sign is I pick up their foot and it feels like the leg is heavy. So instead of them, having that ability to lift the scapula up, it's like the bottom of the leg bends, but the whole leg doesn't lift, if that makes sense. So you really can assess a lot by the horse's ability to pick up their feet, to have them cleaned out or trimmed, and also the way they put the leg down, so if you just drop the leg, and obviously this can come into other neurological aspects as well, but when you drop the leg down to the horse that I talked about in part 1 with the dysfunctional serratus, he was the windsucker one, when I let his leg go, it drops to the ground. So he doesn't utilize his thoracic sling muscles to control that motion of the forelimb, like coming down. So he should, even if I drop that, he should control it down. And that can be a neurological dysfunction, but it can also be a muscular dysfunction as well. The other one I would say is their ease in both moving forward and stopping. So a horse with a functional thoracic sling will lift and then step forward without feeling like they get heavy on your hand. So you won't have to pull them. They will activate their own forward motion. And when you ask them to stop, they won't pull and lean into you. And so a horse that's really struggling to mobilize that rib cage between its scapulas, they lose that ability in both moving forward and stopping. So it's like as you stop them, it crashes forward. It's like bang, 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 like dominoes. And then so that's when they're stopping. It just feels like they kind of crash into your hand or they pull you. And then when you're going, it's like, again, they pull you forward instead of feeling light and up. And I do a prac in the dissection where we look at the difference between putting the head and neck in a position and what happens if we lift the sternum, which is technically activation of the thoracic sling. When we lift the sternum, like you were talking about that head and neck position and the sternum engagement, and when we do that under dissection, the head and neck just lengthen and reach, and it actually takes a lot of stress off the neck muscles, off the back muscles, off it. Also, it was cool. We did it recently in a dissection, and the other thing, I think it was in the foal as well, but the other thing that was really interesting was like we could see in the foal how when we lifted the sternum, the core and the pelvis, like how it could, like how it all had to work as one unit, so for the thoracic sling to be lifted appropriately, the core has to work, the hind limb has to engage, the head and neck has to soften and lengthen, and the spine has to lift. Like that's healthy motion and just how it was so connected to that sternum being able to lift. So, and that'll also show through in your transitions. So if you have a horse again with a healthy thoracic sling, they will, like I said, in going forward and stopping, but they'll also have better upward and downward transitions in all gaits because they've got an absorption of the motion through the thoracic sling and also that lifting action of the thoracic sling. And I treated a horse actually last night who I treat regularly. He's an older horse, but the owner called me and said, "Oh, there's something wrong with him. Can you come check him?" And so I looked at him and I thought, oh, like it looked like he was sore in his feet. And the owner said, no, like I'm sure he's not sore in his feet. Like I'm really sure that it wasn't that. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm just going through his body. And then the way that he trotted on the hard ground, he lifted himself and braced. And then on the grass, it was a bit better. And then I found that it wasn't technically part of the thoracic sling, but it's where the trapezius and the rhomboid attaches to the nuchal ligament at the front of the scapula. And I had my hand over there. It was really restricted in those first few thoracic vertebrae, and it was like grinding in there. Like it was like gristly is how I describe it. I don't know what he did to create that, but he had been playing with another horse. And so once we freed that up, we got it all moving, addressed his whole body, trotted him out on the hard surface, and he did exactly what happens in the dissection. He lifted his sternum and he elongated his nose and his neck, and even the owner who was leading him was like, oh my God, he felt like he had suspension back and he was like carrying himself. And so sometimes it's thoracic sling dysfunction and it's not specifically those muscles, but it's connections to them that creates that dysfunction. And it was a really, of course I didn't video it, but it was a really good example of thoracic sling functioning versus thoracic sling dysfunctioning. So
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot, but it's important.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, particularly that nuchal ligament, because
Nuchal ligament health as well.
yeah, and just how it ties into that sling. I mean, it in itself is a form of a sling system, and they're so connected, particularly with those trapezius and rhomboid
And latissimus.
and latissimus. Yeah, all the
You know,
way.
like they have a real connection into that nuchal ligament and the supraspinous ligament. So you can have a lot of dysfunction in the thoracic sling if you have an unhappy ligament system as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then that takes us into a collapse sling. So like, what are the things that you see? We've obviously described a few of them there, but what do you see with a dysfunctional thoracic sling? Collapse.
Yeah, collapsing, definitely just poor self-carriage. So one way that turns up often is that when you're asking horses for collection and engagement, they can duck behind the vertical, and you'll see it in some spaces when people are trying to achieve a false frame. You know, that's how what they're aiming for in an attempt to collect and engage a thoracic sling at the same time, because there has been an idea that, you know, when the head goes down or tucks under, that automatically the back lifts. And in our episode Long and Low, we actually talk about the fact that as an advanced move, once your horse can lift the base of the neck, engage behind, you can ask for telescopic action that includes sometimes moving, you know, the head goes a bit lower as through variable postures, but that in this instance, you know, it doesn't automatically mean that when the head goes down, the back lifts and opens up because the thoracic sling has been engaged. So it can be done, but it's not an automatic thing. So you often see horses behind the vertical, or you can also see horses that are on the forehand, but it looks like they're lifted because
They're bracing.
they're they're bracing, and you can almost see from the lumbar that it looks like they sink forward under their saddle. So there's no true lift there. And sometimes horses with big, this isn't front thoracic sling, but it looks like they have this really big hind end motion coming under the body, but there's no power generation until the limb is actually a little bit out behind the body, and it's not lifted through the lumbar. It actually just kind of sinks forward down towards under the saddle, and that is always paired with a horse that is just very braced in the front end, and you can often see it through the neck and the sternum. There's often a lot of lines through the pectorals as well. You can see the ropiness. Other things you see with a collapsed sling, like you were saying, a lack of ability to lift at the base of the wither, everything you were saying about just lifting through that space. They don't engage their core musculature.
Yeah, they just can't.
They just can't. And then, again, that contributes in a way to what you're talking about with the horse that looked like their feet were sore. You can have a lot of lameness misdiagnoses from thoracic sling issues as well. In so many places. I mean, all the structures we talked about, all the muscles, but even just altered motion from a functional perspective that looks asymmetrical. You can have saddle fitting issues, not only because the saddle doesn't fit, but because the horse is too hard to fit. If they have a big big wither pocket, because they're always falling down.
High wither because
Yep.
they're not kind of lifting. Yep.
Yeah, and no muscle development around it. They're very hard to fit. Also, you see excessive forelimb concussion and an overloading of the soft tissue structures. I know we definitely talked about that in the previous episode in depth, coming through the flexors and the carpals and how motion is taken through the joints rather than the thoracic sling.
Yeah, and the fetlock often sinks more because it can't support like the lack of lift through the thoracic sling.
Yeah. And yeah, so chronic overload of the front end also shows up, especially in sport horses and older horses. And what I was just saying, having a disengaged hindquarter due to issues coming through there. Anything else that stands out to you generally?
Yeah, I mean, the dip in front of the wither is a big one that we often see. And the other one is lumps at the back of the scapula, kind of below the wither pocket. And that's where the serratus is entering underneath the scapula. It's also a junction point of many muscles. Like you've got the serratus coming in there, the triceps coming in there, the latissimus.
Teres major.
Yep, Terry. So you've got heaps of muscles coming into the back of that scapula, and if it becomes like it's had lots of damage in there, it can become quite calcified. And then that is actually, even no matter what work you do, that calcification will prevent that horse from utilizing its thoracic sling. It just cannot functionally lift through the thoracic sling because of that. So we need to really look at the back of that. It's kind of just around the base of the wither pocket into the back of the scapula there. And that can happen because of weak thoracic sling, but it can also happen with overloaded thoracic sling, poor posture, or just strain through those attachments. And I thought of another one. The other one was, I was just going to give an example of a lameness misdiagnosis. So, older horse, I think I've talked about him before, but I can't remember. But anyway, it applies to this episode. He'd had at least 2 vets look at him for an obvious forelimb lameness. And it was really pronounced. Like even I was like, it's got to be in the distal limb, like for how lame he was. He was an older horse. And but he'd had 2 vets, he'd had x-rays, he'd had nerve blocks, and nothing was showing up. And so I was like, okay, he had an old scar on his chest. And so I went into that scar. The scar happened when he was a young horse. So the owner's like, oh, but that scar's been there for, how old is he? Like 16 years or something. But when I palpated in there, he was like, ow. And he couldn't stabilize his limb either. So he was lame, but there was also an instability in the way that he was using that limb. And I see this often, like a shoulder instability that's related to thoracic sling function, and it can be very mild, like just a mild delay in the way they're using the forelimb, or it can be more pronounced where this is a lameness. Anyway, yeah, the scar was active. It was obviously being triggered by something. It was very painful and it was complex. It was affecting multiple muscles. And so yeah, over a couple of treatments, and he got turned out for a while as well. And then I also gave the owner, when he came back in, talked to her about how to help him activate those muscles appropriately. And he went on to win a high-level working equitation competition and has not been lame ever since. But scars are big, influencing factor. And I guess what the example there of the collapsed sling was that he'd lost control of that leg to the point of lameness.
Yeah.
So yeah, that takes us into issues that affect the thoracic sling. So we've already talked about a couple there, like saddle fit, entheses. Can I just talk a little bit about hoof balance and then back to you? Because I have an epiphany moment the other day. And it makes complete sense. But I was riding Jelly And I was like, oh, he's pretty comfortable with his feet at the moment, considering how hard the ground is. And it was only within a week of his trim, and often I have to put boots on him. Like I can feel the difference in the movement. And then I thought, oh my gosh, he had the gelding scar stuff done. Okay, he has thoracic sling challenges. He used to go in a false frame. Like he just learnt how to do that. And even his old owner said when they got him, he'd already was in that way of going. Like he would just sit there. Anyway, I was riding him around, I was like pretty comfortable in his feet. And I thought, oh, it's because he can use his hind end better, that he can actually lift and engage his thoracic sling. And it's changing the way that the fascia is connecting into his feet.
Yep.
And so I've had a couple of these cases recently, like one I talked to you about just before, but I've had a couple of these cases recently where they've been barefoot, so it helps to see this, but where the feet have appeared to be the problem, got the thoracic sling functioning properly. For whatever reason, it wasn't functioning. So for Jelly, like chronic hind end issues. For another horse, it was actually a really bad hyoid issue. And then for that other one that I just talked about, it was actually a wither issue. So it's not always the same reason, but for some reason they can't use their thoracic sling, and it shows up in their feet. Because you think about it, especially on a hard surface, there's got to be some concussion absorption through the thoracic sling. Thoracic sling is not working. Feet are like, I have to control my whole movement through how I step with my foot because I can't take the weight off using my thoracic sling. And then from a dissection perspective, we can play with fascia up in the shoulder and see how it influences the frog. Like, see how it influences the distal limb.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of like, duh. That's why horses are more comfortable in their feet when we address their thoracic sling, because it's all fascially connected.
Yep.
And we just always look at a foot problem as a foot problem. And I was just like, it's not always a foot problem.
Not always a problem. You know, it's actually so funny you say that, because I had the exact same experience with my own feet. Early this summer, I was having really sore feet. And I thought, oh, it must be my boots. Yeah, I kept thinking I need to go and get some different boots. And obviously I just hadn't made it to the shops, but I got very strict about starting the day with all of my mobilizations and my activations, and you know, spending like doing quite a few like squats and some pelvic thrusts, etc., while I was like filling water troughs and hosing down the yards. And I just remembered that I never felt any feet pain after.
That's the same as me. I was riding Jelly, and I've recently done a clinic with Mel Fleming, right? And so we're all about how we use our body, how we get on, how we get off, how we sit when we're riding. Every time I go on a trail ride with Jelly, my feet are killing me. Like I come back and they're just, especially my right one, that's my dodgy leg. Oh, it's so painful. I don't even want to get off. It hurts so much. The other day, I changed the way that I sat in the saddle. Basically, equivalent of me engaging my thoracic sling, because I actually sat with a little curve and softened through my pelvis. So basically engaging my core without brace, lifting through my thoracic sling, because lengthening through my spine. And so I sat very differently in the saddle. So my pelvis was in a different orientation. And when I got back, I was like, oh my God, I've got a little bit of pain in the outside of my toe, which is usually numb anyway. But I was like, oh my God, my feet don't hurt, because I actually supported myself through the entire ride, and I absorbed any concussion I was able to absorb it through my spine and like through my body, that I wasn't like pushing down in my stirrups. And that's kind of the same thing as the horse being able to utilize their thoracic sling. Like they've got this suspension system that means that the feet don't have to take as much load. It's like a light bulb.
Incredible. It's magic.
Oh, that's so funny that we both had
Humans
the
and
same.
horses. Yeah, I think I remember saying to you, my feet are really hurting. We were like,
Yeah.
yeah, shoes, damn. Need different shoes.
Our
That's
suspension systems.
just improved a bit. Oh, that's good. Oh,
All right. So, do you want to go through some ways that people can assess the integrity of their horse's thoracic sling?
yes. So there are different ways you can make assessments on different things. One being you can simply look at your horse at rest and have a look at their body. And some things that you can look for are whether their wither looks like it's sitting low or sunken between their two scapulars. So it just kind of looks, especially when they put their head down to eat. You often see
It
the
looks like they're kind
scapula.
of hunched almost. Like if you imagine bringing your shoulders up to your ears,
Yeah.
some of them look that extreme. Like their
Yeah.
scapula is sitting up and forward, and the withers kind of, they've lost their wither.
Yeah. Or even if you stand on all fours on the ground and just allow your chest to sink forward, you'll see what we mean. The line of the wither. So often this might be more, oh, well, whether the horse's head is down or not, but the line of the wither being both in front of the wither. You can see a dip in front of the wither often when the horse, if you imagine the horse's head and neck comes out straight from the body, you'll often see a little dip in front of the wither. And also you can see a very steep angle at the base of the wither often when there is some thoracic sling weakness or collapsing. And conversely, you often see a beautiful projection of the wither into the neck, like it just looks really beautiful and smooth, and it doesn't look like there's a big dip at the base of the wither, like a steep angle when you have a really healthy thoracic sling. The scapula's being level and lying flush with the rib cage. So both at the top of the wither, it just looks like the scapula comes nicely into the wither. There's no hollow on top of the scapula, and also behind the rib cage. So often there's it sort of looks like sometimes when the horse twists, almost like it looks like the scapula looks like it sort of comes up off the rib cage a little bit, and also that the muscles there can often be very lumpy and dippy, like the serratus ventralis muscle. You can have a look at where the sternum is sitting between the shoulders. Like if you look at the point of shoulders and go between them, you'll find the sternum. And when there's a weak thoracic sling, it often dips down and forward, like it's pushing out between, almost like when you put your limbs on the ground and you push your chest down and forward.
Especially when they're grazing. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you can see that when they're grazing, like I think I was looking maybe at Henry the other day or one of them, and a horse that their thoracic sling is not, so if they're grazing and their thoracic sling is good, like they can kind of lift up naturally and support, like the scapulas don't look like they're really protruding, but when the thoracic sling is quite weak, it's like, again, if you imagine yourself back on all fours, it's like the scapulas kind of look like they're protruding and sticking out from the body, and the neck looks like when they're grazing it kind of drops down between the scapulas. So you can look at them both standing, stationary, and grazing.
Definitely. You also see horses can have a weak neck when their thoracic sling isn't functioning well, and they also often have a hollow wither pocket. So that's just behind the scapula, really where the top line would be. There's in that pocket there just behind. It's not the whole top line, but that spot in particular is what we're talking about. And conversely, when your horse has a great thoracic sling, that space is often nice and developed, and the tone of the muscle is pliable. It's not stiff and hard, it's just pliable. And when the horse moves their body, you can see it activating and working.
Yeah, it's not braced in that wither pocket. It's like a nice consistency.
Yes. So if you were palpating a horse and assessing their thoracic sling, what kind of things would you see?
Well, I think like those entheses sites at the back of the scapula, so you want to assess that for sure. the smoothness and comfort through the top of the scapula, so through your rhomboids and your trapezius, especially, the cervical trapezius, which runs up the neck below the nuchal ligament. It can become quite tight and hypertrophied, so enlarged. Also feeling down through the girth area, that should feel nice and smooth. So if there's lumps and bumps, going all the way underneath to feel that ascending pectoral, and feeling that lobe where it comes back behind the girth as well for lumps and reactiveness. And also feeling through the chest area. Again, like we mentioned in the other episode when you were talking about the pecs, like really palpating along the sternum, because that's where they get a lot of damage, and really up against that forelimb. So if I've seen people miss a lot of pectoral damage because they haven't been thorough enough in their palpation of those pectorals. So yeah, just really feeling through those muscles and those attachments all around the scapula, through the front, and just feeling reactiveness, pain, all of those things, and then looking at how it can actually move, So, one movement thing would be lifting the leg up and seeing, can they lift the leg, like, can you lift the scapula upwards, or is there resistance? Do they drop on you? And can you swing the leg forwards and backwards? Is there freedom in the ability to swing the leg? So they'd be kind of 2 leg movement tests. What other movement tests would you add in there?
I would say asking the horse to lift from the base of the neck. So there is a way to ask them to do that. Both, you can ask them to sort of lift their sternum and rock back, but you can also ask them to lift the base of their neck. And when you do that, you should see a real engagement of the sternum, almost see the sternum just slightly move up and back. As a side note, when we see people in the equine functional posture course and we're teaching them that, it's really important to remember that if your horse has a restricted thoracic sling, this is very difficult, and you often get a try, and if you're not used to looking for it, you can't see it. And so you push beyond, like if you ask them for a little motion and they give what they can give you, and you don't see it and you continue to ask, what happens is they just will take a step back or they rock back. And if you reward that and you do that too many times, it's actually hard to sometimes come back and then ask for the smaller motion. If that would be if you turned it into like something you were trying to do every day with your horses, was to lift the base of the neck. If you don't do it within their range of motion, they will simply strive to give you what they think you want. And if that's more motion, it's not a true thoracic lift. And most horses, it's quite limited. So it's just worth thinking about when you try and ask your horse to do that they probably won't give you very much, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and you can also assess that by putting your palm with your fingers downward between the front legs and your palm on the front of the sternum and your other hand underneath the girth area, and we call it rock the baby, but you can ask if you direct the movement up towards the base of the wither. Is there motion there? Like, can the rib cage glide kind of forward and back along the scapulas? And then also you can come in on the side of the sternum from so you can reach your fingers around to the other side of the sternum and use your palm on the side closest to you, and also pull and push the sternum away from you and see whether it has the ability to rotate within those scapulars as well. Because I've had horses where you ask for that and they won't be able to do the belly lift. So horses that can't do the belly lift, sometimes that's a restriction in the thoracic sling. They'll struggle to, like what you were talking about, lift through the base of their neck. And they'll struggle when you ask for any movement kind of through that sternum glide along the backs of the scapula. So yeah, they can be useful tests. What about when we're watching the horse in motion? How could we kind of see thoracic sling weakness or
So,
function?
one thing to look for is the movement of the head, neck, and the barrel while they're walking. So you might have a look from in front and behind. And this is actually something we have an episode on in our three observations. We go into the head, neck, and the barrel moving actually. But it's good to see the barrel moving from side to side. And sometimes when you
A
watch
little rotation.
yeah, a little bit of rotation, or like a little bit like that pendulum motion. You want to see that in the head and the neck, just a little bit side to side motion, and also the rib cage. Sometimes you see the rib cage and it'll go like up and to the left and then down to the right, and it's tied into the shoulders that are uneven, like you'll have some big scapular asymmetry going on. So just seeing that it's available, not overdone. Like you don't want to see it like jutting out to one side and then pushing back the other way.
Yeah, sometimes you do see it just going side to side and it loses that swinging
Yeah.
up motion as well. So that's like the rotation and the sidewards motion, as well as I lost my train of thought.
Oh, well, I was going to go talk about that similar motion, but through the scapula. They can
Yeah.
have a winging motion where sometimes you see it further down in the limb. That's where, like, because it becomes more exaggerated as it goes all the way down. So you see like a paddling, or they come really narrow, or it's one limb, or it's both, but it's just an abnormal scapular movement. And I also think that having a look when they're moving, if you can kind of locate the scapula and keep your eyes on it, whether that's the scapular spine or the outline of it, when the horse walks, does it have this nice like cranial rotation, caudal rotation? Like when the limb goes, yeah, and when
like a windscreen wiper.
yeah, it is like a windscreen wiper, and you just get a little bit of, when the horse goes to pick up their foot off the ground, the scapula actually moves up a little bit, and then like it just having that motion and just having a look. I actually film the motion of like every horse as I'm assessing them, just because it's really hard once you take your eyes off one scapula sometimes to then compare it to the other one because it's facing the other direction. But being able to see, does it move, does it not move, and does it actually, I just wanted to say in the observing at rest, the angle of the scapula. Sometimes you'll see a scapula becomes very upright when you have issues, particularly with the subclavians.
Forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost looks like the legs are further forward on the thorax than they should be, and the shoulders are kind of squishing in, and it looks like they have a really long belly or back, but I think the legs have actually just slipped forward a bit too far.
And then you get that real closed shoulder look as
Pinched.
well.
Yeah. And so that upright shoulder can sometimes only be on one side and not the other. I've seen that sometimes. So just because you have an issue on one side too, you might go to the other side and it's not there or it's different. So having a look at both sides. In the dynamic assessment, you can have tripping or a shortened stride. And also they often slap their foot on the ground, like it's loud.
Lack of control.
Yeah, when they land. And also when they move, this comes back to what you were saying, when they are about to initiate movement or they're stopping, does the chest sink and sway, or are they able to lift their wither, before they stop or start? What else can you think of in dynamic assessment? I know we've talked about a few things as we were going through.
Yeah, I think that one's really important, and people, it's something you need to develop an eye for in motion, because I see, and I've done it myself, where we ask the horse to move forward, but we create a pull on the lead rope, or a push if we're on them. So we kick, we squeeze or whatever. And a horse that's not ready or had time to walk properly will drop the sternum forward and initiate the motion from the lower limbs. a horse and they'll kind of duck their head out a bit, like they'll kind of push their head forward as opposed to telescoping the neck. And a horse that's like dynamically using their thoracic sling well, they will initiate the motion from that shoulder connection to the thoracic sling. So you won't see the sternum slipping forward. You'll actually see them kind of lift, and then the initiation comes from the biceps brachii and the shoulder. And so the motion of the limb comes from the upper limb, and then they bring the lower limb through. And that's something that you just need to develop your eye, and it can be very challenging because a lot of horses are not doing it properly, and also it can be challenging because to allow a horse to do it properly, sometimes you have to give them a few seconds. It's like us, I don't know, picking up a water bucket, right? To pick that bucket up, you just need a few seconds to like, oh, yep, okay, I've got my balance and I've got my posture and I'm going to use my whole body to pick up the water bucket, as opposed to just leaning forward and picking up the water bucket. And then you put a lot of strain into your body, into your shoulder, into your lower back, because you just needed a few seconds. Unless you've done it the right way 1,000 times and you've got the pattern really well established in your body, then you'll just do it automatically. But most horses haven't. So then they just need a few seconds, and they also need to often be shown how to do it to go, oh, yep, okay, I'm organized, whoop, and step out from the shoulder. And, you know, I was also just thinking, Jelly used to trip a fair bit. And always when he would trip, I'd assess his thoracic sling, and he always gets jammed up in the right ribs, right cranial ribs. And it'd always be that leg that he'd trip on. Often when his feet were ready to be done, it would happen in the week before. And he's on a 5-week trim cycle. I don't think he's tripping as much since he also had his gelding scar done. And the interesting thing is that the deep inguinal ring restriction was on, so his gelding scar on the right side was worse. And I'll have to assess his thoracic sling function a little bit closer, but yeah, it was a common thing for him to trip, especially and hit poles.
Yep.
And so their ability to pick up those limbs and stay lifted and not push forward is really valuable thing to train your eye on and train your feel on.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, I think that gives people lots of things they can go look at their horses for. So do you have some takeaways?
Yes, I think the biggest takeaways is that the thoracic sling isn't just a group of muscles, but that it's a functional system, and it has lots of different roles and contributes to lots of different kinds of movement, including coordinating the limbs, stabilizing the spine, and helping to utilize power from the hind end, on top of suspending the thorax as a sling system. And that when it's doing well, so it's strong, balanced, it's responsive and automatic, that's true self-carriage, when the horse is able to feel like it's floating and they have healthy posture and good performance. And like always, having a balanced physical horse gives you a much more emotionally balanced horse as well, which you're always aiming for because it makes life easy and because it contributes to their well-being. So it's really important. And it always, like, having self-carriage, it literally means to carry oneself. And so if you only have been taught to carry yourself while somebody's on you, like you're being ridden, you never really learnt self-carriage. You learnt self-carriage plus, like the self-carriage version of
Which is very challenging for a horse to, you know, I don't think it's actually possible for a horse to learn self-carriage with a rider. I think they have to learn it before they have to carry something, and really have it ingrained in their neural pathways that like they know how to move, they know how to how to support their body in the best optimal postural way before we add us, who we also have a responsibility to also know how to carry ourselves in the most efficient, supportive way too, so that we're not increasing the load through their thoracic sling. Even through holding them is going to, even just a little bit of pressure on the reins changes the way that they carry themselves, let alone our balance and our imbalances. Like the other day I got off Jelly, I was like, geez, he was really crooked today. And then I have a look at my own leg and I'm like, my leg's not activating very well today. So it's like, it's his function and he needs to have that and he has challenges. But it's my function to then be able to support him in his function as well.
Definitely.
So, just think of it as really important part of their suspension system. It really creates their ability to glide and feel like they're floating. A horse that's got a good active thoracic sling, when you ride them, they will feel like they're floating, and they'll feel like that hind limb, like it's just like you've got a V8 engine back there, because it can just transmit through the entire body. It's cool, but it's hard for the horse to, it takes time and patience for the horse to develop that really well. So thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler and Sophie Vandenberg, in today's podcast. It's been a fun one. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to share more valuable insights. Keep an eye out for our next Equine Functional Posture course, and we'll see you soon.
See you in the next exciting episode.